This is Jonathan Yates with CollegeAD. We're in Washington, D.C. again, but this time we're not here to interview members of Congress on Capitol Hill. We're down to Pennsylvania Avenue Corridor interviewing Mr. Tyrone Thomas, head of the Diversity Committee and a partner with the law firm of Mintz Levin. Mr. Thomas, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Pleasure to be here today.
First of all, Mr. Thomas, I think we have to start off with everybody's mind. Congratulations on your Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl.
Well, thank you. A long time coming on that one.
Well, I think in terms of time, everybody will appreciate the interview. It will be the first time over 5 minutes that an Eagle fan does not complain about the officiating, so we're all looking forward to that.
Everybody's happy since February, I can tell you that.
So when you talk about sports, you have to talk about diversity too. As President Obama said, I wouldn't be in office if it wasn't for Jackie Robinson. What's the sports practice here like in dealing with diversity? What are the main issues?
So our client base is pretty diverse. I mean, to kind of think about that world, we represent a number of people in the university sector, starting with the governors and athletic directors, really to help them understand what their risk points are in athletic administration. But as you may imagine, we do a lot of crisis issues, and to do that effectively, you have to be able to have people talk to you. And that means you have to have a diverse group of lawyers who are able to get information, not see blind spots, and get the information that's needed to help inform your clients of things they need. So we actually target making sure that we kind of self-audit ourselves. Are we making sure that we are diverse as a group, that we actually understand the viewpoints of our clients and issues that they are presenting and faced with on a daily basis, and it's a good business advantage for us.
Now, I've read an article on LinkedIn by Lisa Wardwell, the CEO of Adtalem Global Applications. Mm-hmm. She's the only African-American female CEO of a Fortune 500 firm. And she pointed out a McKinsey study that says the firm with the higher diversity has a higher profit margins. Have you found that in your practice?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, as we've grown in diversity numbers, and the legal profession, quite frankly, has a ways to grow for large national firms, we've actually found that as we've progressed, our 3 most successful years have actually risen with our progress on diversity. And a lot of that we actually tone to the fact that we're exposed to a greater number of folks from referrals. We're exposed to a greater development network. Our ability to strategize is actually a lot more efficient. Our clients love the fact that we're able to look at things from a number of perspectives. And quite frankly, if we're being honest about it, some of our clients may be suffering from a lack of diversity themselves. And having the ability to talk to them in a frank way about that issue and how it affects their business operations helps everyone, succeed and cure operational deficiencies, reduce blind spots, do risk management, and all those things to help your bottom line.
And how receptive are your clients when you point that out to them and say, hey, you have a huge potential legal liability here?
Well, the good thing for us right now, and in the legal sector, the American Bar Association has taken a great lead on this in having a resolution, ABA Resolution 113, which encourages legal service providers and purchasers to look at diversity. They now are very attuned to the issue. There is not just an issue for the procurement function. What are we spending our contract dollars on? They're really looking and digging down to say, all right, let's have a frank discussion about what we're looking at as far as on succession planning, risk management, and you don't have to sugarcoat that in the realm of, well, you're doing well here and we can emphasize that, but look, if you're going to have a holistic policy and integrate this in your strategic operations, let's talk about what that means for you. Let's talk about who you're doing business with. Let's talk about your exposure with government entities. Let's talk about what, the sources of your internal complaints have been. Let's talk about, kind of the Me Too harassment issues and things like that may have come up. And the culmination of those things together, when you talk about them in a proactive way, boards in particular love that, senior leadership loves that, the athletic directors that we have worked with and the rising pipeline of those who are now more attuned to diversity love that. And it's a good discussion. I think it's a great tool in our toolbox to actually use to get more business.
Now, in terms of the Me Too movement, you've seen a lot of executives out there who've been a lot more receptive into calling you for advice and saying, how do I protect my flanks?
Yes. I think we're really at the beginning of this, to be frank, in that a lot of the number of issues that have come up in the Me Too type complaints have been, quite frankly, not really at the surface for a long time. So a number of entities are really now learning, okay, what is my environment like? What is my risk portfolio? What types of things have we not been aware of? And then from a best practices perspective, let's talk about this. Let's say that, fortunately, we've been in a situation where we have not really had that issue. Well, how do we not have that happen in the future? One of the good things about this coming to the forefront is that everybody's taking a second look about how they're handling things, not just from a policy perspective, because words on paper sound great. As a lawyer, I can say that.
Sure.
But if you don't implement it the right way, and people don't understand how it means, and your executive structure says that these are just words, it's not really going to be helpful to you. So let's put some color behind it. Let's put some meaning behind it. Let's talk about things we don't understand. Let's talk about how our tone is. Let's talk about mansplaining things, about how that goes into looking at different effects. If you've had 100 investigations on issues in a 25-year period and you haven't had one finding of something, maybe do we need to look a second look at that? Who's looking at that? Have you looked at it all internally? Have you gotten good advice on that? But I think it's a great opportunity for us now, whether or not you've actually had one of these on your doorstep, and especially as they've now risen to the senior executive levels. I know for a number of folks, it's, you hear about some very big names that this has happened with, and what do we do? It's incumbent now at the top of the chain, because it may be your chief executive, and now your board has to get involved. How do we inform ourselves about how to do what needs to be done to make sure we're protecting the enterprise here? How do we do what we need to do to make sure that as we filter down in the leadership ranks, the right messaging is taking place? So it really is a top-down function.
So let's talk about being proactive. My father worked in financial services his entire career, and the one thing I remember he always pounded into me was that only producers survive. How do you point out that diversity results in greater production? As we know, a stock only goes up from higher earnings.
So one of the misnomers about diversity is that it's kind of an either-or enterprise with profitability, that you actually, are we choosing the right business paradigm, or are we actually emphasizing diversity? And I think if we look at it and look at it the right way from a financial perspective, the answer is both, right? That if you're not maximizing diversity and looking at the right way, anyone can look at a balance sheet and say, okay, I'm going to look at my grid and I'm going to see who actually is bringing in or is in control of the largest amount of revenues or production within the organization. And for a lot of entities, that's not going to be the most diverse list. Just being frank about that. Sure. But then you got to look at cause and effect and what's helping you rise business, and it's what's projecting out in the future. If you're looking at, your rise of both women-owned business enterprises, minority-owned business enterprises, the partnerships that are developed with that. If you're looking about the talent base that you're bringing in, right, and who's managing that talent structure, and who's in control of those decisions, so that you're not making blind spots by what I call recreating the same thing. One of my sports analogies I've always brought to our clients is that, when you have a championship team and they win the title, the very next day the coach is thinking about what they can improve to win the title the next day. They don't say that I'm going to put out the exact same roster with the exact same blueprint and do the exact same thing and expect to win. Why? Because people are catching up to you. So the same thing applies here. If you're going to do well, you have to examine this, not just looking at a grid that says this is who's at this level, this is who's at that level. What types of talents do we need to bring in? What are our creative blind spots? What are our strategic analysis blind spots? What are the things that we're not getting as far as infiltration in different sectors? How are we operating, again, with government entities that mandate certain types of diversity participation? What does this operate as far as, if you're looking at the college university structure, with respect to our outreach, alumni relations, and things like that actually could be helpful to us? There's a whole dichotomy that rolls into that when you think about it that way. It becomes more than a spreadsheet, and you actually say, wow, we're missing a lot of dollars in revenue that we can bring in if we look at this from a more granular level.
And so what is the role of inclusion in this?
So with respect to inclusion, we always talk about diversity, which is making sure we have the pool, right, of diverse candidates and people from different backgrounds, which, by the way, goes beyond your EEO categories. I always say that, and even as an employment lawyer, it goes beyond saying, do we have the right, is there minorities involved, or do we have women involved? Well, no. But there's experiences involved. There's educational background involved. There's different aspects of that. And the inclusion aspect is to make sure that when we talk about the culture of an organization, and, there's often a culture of what's the right fit for us. Particularly in about institutions that have been around for dozens and hundreds of years, as we've had within the higher education system, it's about understanding, okay, this is a viewpoint we've not heard before. How does that actually affect us? Are we comfortable having that conversation? Do we welcome that discussion, right? And it's the ability to have someone who has seen something from a different lens and their ability to share that thought and the group that frame that thought. Now, sometimes it may be adopted, sometimes it may be modified, but it's a discussion. The discussion itself is the integration of it, right? Having the ability to have a discussion about viewpoints you have not heard from before, from folks you've not had typically in the strategic enterprise before, which is so critical. You have to bring other voices into the strategic enterprise. That's the inclusive part, because now, to the old saying, diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance or being able to dance at the party. Well, that's the dance now. Now we're dancing, now we're moving, we have kind of the concerto of different voices going, and that's where you get the best blend as far as business decisions.
Now, speaking of the dance, we're heading towards the Final Four, and the big story was UMBC beating Virginia. Front page article of Washington Post with an interview with Dr. Freeman Rabowski, the president of UMBC, who's a math jock, and much of the interview he talked about inclusion. He said this is the perfect example of inclusion and excellence and innovation. He said on our team we had a guard from Puerto Rico, we had a guard from Whitewater, Wisconsin, and we had 4 guys who were local talent from Maryland, which is obvious because Maryland has the best high school sports in America. So I pitched that for my show. So what do you think about that? He said that has unified our campus, having a diverse basketball team with excellence and innovation and inclusion.
I love the comment and I love the observation behind it, because one of the things that in college athletics really that doesn't get understood as much as it does is how the diversity of the teams themselves brings so much to the campus life. And what I mean by that is you look at the visibility, and it can be on a number of campuses, but taking UMBC, where you're talking about a team that's succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, eliminating a number 1 seed, apologies to UVA fans, but had the ability to shine in that area.
Sure.
And what that means as far as now, you are spokespersons or basically ambassadors of that campus. What does that mean for the campus as a whole? What does that mean as far as getting to know the personalities on that team? And the integration of athletics and being able, and if we look at athletics where you have, particularly in the sports of basketball and football, where you have these pretty diverse teams, particularly by racial makeup, and the success that they're having on campuses that don't necessarily reflect those teams. And the ability to now have people meet folks that they have not had a chance to meet before, but also have those folks in the forefront, and to see the adoption of the incumbent responsibility that is by these young student athletes about what it means to be an ambassador for University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and say, look, I really am prideful of this. I'm prideful of the opportunity to compete, but I'm also prideful of the ability to actually share my experience with my campus and what that means for us. And that's a wonderful thing, and I'm glad that Dr. Rabowski brought that up.
So based on UMB's success with inclusion and diversity, what would you tell other athletic directors?
I would say don't undersell what you are providing to your campus. Don't undersell what you're providing to your campus as far as experience, as far as diversity, as far as experience with, and this becomes frankly part of the conversation that a number of folks have had about athletic student life. And when we talk about a number of issues that go to the legal background of what the NCAA structure is, that part of this is the importance of keeping the student athlete part of that structure so that you share that experience. And for athletic directors, that's a wonderful asset you have. It's a wonderful gift. And by the way, a lot of the students who are coming in who may have been in environments in high school where they didn't have the chance to share that because of club teams or what have you, that's a unique experience. And to have the ability to get out and then share thoughts, we talk about what student athletes have the ability to talk about on social issues and things like that. A lot of that happens in the classroom. A lot of that can happen back and forth in discussion with other students, with peer groups, with alumni that are involved in mentorship and things like that. And that's such a tremendous asset that I hope that all athletic directors are proudful of what that means, particularly given the communities that some of the student athletes are coming from, being first-time generation. I was at an athletic event, I can't remember exactly which one, but we were having the student athletes raise their hand about which ones were first-time college attendees. That's a wonderful thing. And you're talking about something that would not have passed down generationally to someone that would have not have been in that position, but for their participation in athletics. And let's let a light shine on that a bit more. Let's let that shine, and let's let the public know that beyond the Final Four, which is great, and the competition that we see here, which is wonderful, and look forward to great games, as it comes forward to those games. But these are real people. These are real kids who actually have done a lot and actually have a lot to really give on the campuses they are in. And let's understand what that means.
Now, you had a unique experience in college and going to Dartmouth. What was that like?
So, coming from metropolitan Philadelphia, I had a love of at least at that time, cold weather and smaller class sizes.
I think New Hampshire got rid of that very quickly.
Oh boy, did I learn that.
It's the reason you went to law school in New Orleans.
That's true. I kept the green and white though, but yeah, I did go to the law school in New Orleans. But it was great because I wanted to see the transition from having something different. There's something about having the challenge for yourself. Very proud that I went to a magnet high school, Central High School, Philadelphia, very proudful school, second oldest public high school in the nation. But to put myself in another environment where, quite frankly, I knew I was going to meet people who didn't have my background. It was going to be a challenge socially. I knew it was going to be a challenge because I didn't travel much geographically. I'm seeing a different area of the country, being in, basically an hour and a half from the Canadian border. But I wanted that because it wasn't just about the academics. There was an experiential element to it that I thought Dartmouth could provide. And in visiting the campus and talking to a couple of friends and outreach before I went there, I was comfortable with that decision.
And what was the adjustment process like at Dartmouth?
So before and after I learned there was no fast food restaurants on campus. The adjustment, my first year, I will be frank, was challenging. Just from the aspect of socially, you're going into a campus where you've not had, there's no person, or there are very few people you can say, okay, that's the mirror image of me.
Right.
And that's, not just a mirror image literally, but I'm just talking about socially and background experiences and things like that. And it took a while to understand that. The one stat I remember my first year at Dartmouth that stuck with me, and I forgot which, there was a boarding school in Massachusetts, and I'm trying to remember which one, but that had, I think, 13 attendees in my freshman class.
Probably Deerfield Academy.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm guessing it was
the city of Philadelphia had 6, meaning Metro Philadelphia. Now, the outside suburban areas had others, but the core of Philadelphia had 6. And I was always concerned about what that meant, that a private school that had a graduating class, which I presume of less than 200 or 250 or something like that, had a double number of a metropolitan area of 2 million. Now, the interesting thing is that the year I matriculated, Dartmouth actually led the Ivies as far as percentage of African American students within the Ivies on campus. And then leads to a development of thought. Well, what is this? Is it wanted to have me here? And when I realized that actually was the challenge, that what, I'm needed here. We need to have people from my background here because, quite frankly, that's not infused in the thought process much. The experience of college campuses is about discourse. If you're learning in the classroom, you should learn as much outside the classroom. This, is the experience I actually share with athletics as well. And once I had that dawn in me, I think it happened after my first year, and the pride that we have of the numerous folks that were at Dartmouth when I was there, meeting Jake Tapper, who was our cartoonist of our student newspaper my freshman year, and acting in a play with Shonda Rhimes before she got people who actually could act for her on ABC.
Reason you went to law school.
But to have those experiences, you just wouldn't have elsewhere, and I was appreciative of that.
So how do you think Dartmouth changed for the better based on your matriculation?
I would like to think that based off of me sharing and opening myself and others doing that we now have, and this is the beautiful thing about Dartmouth, not to go Daniel Webster's Supreme Court case about, it's a small college, but there are those of us who love it. I think it helped have a whole generation of folks behind us who really talked about things in a less aggressive but open manner. That we can talk about, I grew up, obviously seeing in Philadelphia a very political, partisan environment. I think in the late 80s, that going to Dartmouth was completely different. And it made me actually have back and forth about political beliefs. It made me have back and forth about economic and social policies and things like that. And things that have continued after graduation, which is great with people who are now going on to do some pretty cool things. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't. But within our segment, we get to actually have that across industries and talk about these things. And whether it's on social media or alumni meeting, I mean, it's fantastic to hear these very enlightened people have discussions that you don't really get to have, in our country right now, but do it in a way that, it's not threatening. We can do that, and it's fine.
So how did you think spending 4 years at Hanover, New Hampshire at an Ivy League college changed you for the better?
I think the challenge of being outside of myself, and this is, I think, a challenge for all folks, that wherever you are from, you should have some experience in life where you've gone outside yourself, exposed yourself, and seen if you could succeed in that environment. And for me, that was that environment, to be not just in the classroom, but within Hanover, which is a very friendly community, by the way. I actually made a point of living off campus half my time at Dartmouth and, kind of immersing myself with the locals in Hanover. Joining in their experience and frustration when a Gap opened on campus and Subways because we didn't have chain restaurants and things like that back then. But understanding why that meant so much though. Why there was those rules in place about what made Hanover what it was. And I appreciated that, whereas to the outside world, like, that's insane. Why would you not do that? Well, I kind of saw the relationship of how important local businesses were there. Mm-hmm. How it is important that people for, decades can go back, leave, and you have an understanding what that community is going to be like when you get back. And there's something cool about that. Now, nothing should stay static, I would say that. But I do have an appreciation for, the kind of, we know what home is, and it's always going to be comfortable, it's always going to be relaxed, it's never going to be a huge big picture. And having that, and for the Metro guy, me being myself, and having to adopt and understand what that lens looked like was very valuable. And I think when I left Dartmouth, I left with certainly the view that no matter where I chose to go,
it would be warmer.
It would be warmer. It would not snow 20 inches back to back over a weekend day. They probably were going to make the NCAA tournament, but we hold out hope, right? But more importantly, that I could succeed in that environment. That it was going to be an environment we can work with.
So on June 8th on this show, I'm proud to say we're going to be interviewing 5 athletic directors from historic Black colleges and universities. What advice would you give them about diversity and inclusion?
They're needed. My foray in doing advice for athletic institutions was representing one of the universities in the MEAC and the NCAA investigation, and knowing that the paucity of resources that sometimes schools in the SWAC and MEAC and the other HBCU campuses have had, and what they've done magnificently around that to develop student athletes. And what that means as far as a training ground, quite frankly, for potential other leaders is probably understated. Obviously, the viewpoint of being at an HBCU itself and the history and tradition that comes around, and people often forget how many of our professional athletes of the 60s, 70s, and 80s were really from HBCUs that you don't have as much now. But to have those traditions and being able to embellish and keep those traditions and make sure they're understood as far as the history of athletics, I think is big. But their ability to actually manage athletics in a different environment where, again, you may have a lot of just campus-wide, a lot of first-time students coming in who are going away from home and, just a foreign environment. And what that means as far as, you are now the premier thing that may be visible for that campus is a huge thing. And then to have themselves infused into this conversation of diversity, what it means when we talk about concerns with, African American athletes. What does that mean? We talk about concerns that affect all of college athletics on social issues. And how do you express opinions versus, someone saying, okay, I'm going to manage a group of students and help bring them to my cause. How do you help them think about what issues are important to them? Kind of those life skills lessons, and share those discussions that happen on your campuses with our peers in the other Division I, Division II schools. It's a magnificent opportunity. I'm so thrilled that that's happening.
At Bowie State University, whose athletic director, Clyde Dowdy, is a great athletic director, and he's going to be on my show on June 8th. They inaugurated their first white football player in their Hall of Fame this year. What would you tell a white student who's looking to go to college at an HBCU school based on your experience at Dartmouth?
We switched chairs. Well, I would say that, one, congratulations. And I admire your choice because you've now looked at something in a different way that I think most people would have. You would have said that this institution was not necessarily meant for me and I would not have a great experience, but you've now said, you know what? I think there's a great education here. I think it's going to be a great experience for me here, and I think I'm going to learn a lot inside and outside the classroom. So, one, congratulations. Let's start with that.
Yes.
But also, be a sponge. Be a sponge, but be a giving sponge in that you're also sharing yourself. One of the things I always hope when you have non-African American students at HBCUs, I'm married to an HBCU, proud HBCU alum myself, it is the fact that expressing those knowledge issues that you've seen from your environment and infusing into thought. Don't just sponge it away from the school, but also share your thoughts and be helpful to that. Share a perspective and a framework that you've seen and you've grown up with. Because again, it's a college campus. It's a laboratory of ideas. So let's talk about what your experiences and immerse yourself as much as you can. And I think you'll be so surprised about how much that's embraced, when done in a genuine fashion, about understanding and sharing ideas. I mean, these are 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds.
Yes, they're teenagers away from home for the first time.
Yeah, and their framework about having these discussions is so different than ours now. About social media and sharing thoughts in a kind of an instant virtual age. It's very instantaneous. It's very, can happen on the spot. But, immerse yourself into that, and then immerse yourself into the knowledge and culture and sharing your own ideas and thoughts.
And how would you get to them the benefits of being out of your comfort zone for a teenager? You obviously grew from that as a person at Dartmouth. How would you explain that to that white player looking to go to an HBCU?
It's okay if you're different from everyone else. I mean, I'm not saying that, I don't want to sound like a unicorn at Dartmouth. I hope I wasn't that. But, there's nothing wrong with having some traits about yourself that may be different from those around you. That's okay. This is just a lesson in life. Like, no matter where you are, you may be different, whether it's in a private law firm, right? Athletics administration, which we're now growing diversity in and things like that. It's okay to be different. But, express that, but also understand that there's a lot of commonalities too. And you're going to be surprised by the commonalities. It's going to be commonalities that you didn't expect, and it's going to come in ways that surprise you. And then as you learn about the commonalities, that's where you're going to start having some very cool discussions, and you're going to have some friends that you didn't expect to have from different environments that you just never met before. You're going to hear things that you hadn't thought about experiencing before that you're going to bring back to your family. Say, hey, why haven't we done that? Why haven't we gone this place? Why haven't we, ever thought about having this experience? And it's going to be the coolest thing. And you're going to have, again, because of the way the college experience was, you're going to have a network of friends that, that's just, I'm jealous of you for having the boldness to do that, but you're going to have an experience that's going to be fantastic.
Now, after Dartmouth and law school, what made you want to go into sports law and related to that with the employment and the diversity issues?
Well, given how we started this interview talking about my football team, I can understand why you would say that. The essence is this,
There's such a thing as being a gracious winner, too.
We don't know about that in Philadelphia. But the thing that I thought was amazing about that for me is that not having participated, other than brief stint in high school wrestling, in sports, I had appreciation for the discipline involved, I had appreciation for the organization involved, and the enthusiasm behind it. And I always was thinking about ways that I could experience that for myself. And I thought about it, maybe from the business side. I briefly thought about a career in politics. Actually, coming out of Dartmouth, decided that was not for me. And I actually interned for 2 law firms, one in Philadelphia, one in New York, to see what I thought about the experience. And what that taught me was that not all lawyers are the same. Actually, something that's great I wish more law students did, just whether adding some work experience before law school, because I think it adds perspective. But I understand that not all lawyers are the same. It's not about the legal shows you watch on television. There's a lot of different options. But also that, again, to go back to our point again about viewpoint and experience, there could be something pretty cool about somebody from my background going on the business side of this and helping sports institutions advise themselves and govern themselves in a more efficient way, whether it's legal compliance, whether it's helping them with their contractual goals or efficiencies or what have you. And Tulane, where I was happy to go to, was one of 4 premier sports law programs at the time. And I said, what, I had never lived in the South. New Orleans is an interesting area. I think I'll try that. So I went and had a great experience. I'm actually privileged to be going back to talk to my alma mater in a week or so. And again, the experience in the classroom and the environment being in Louisiana was different. But I think the background in sports issues, and actually, for my sake, which I thought was great professionally, to start working in sports law even before I came out of law school, was actually more increasingly beneficial and made some contacts I even have now, 18 some odd years later.
So there's no lawyer who knows more about college sports than you do. How do you see the role of the athletic director evolving?
I think it's getting strengthened. I think there's an appreciation for athletic directors, and this deals with what the profile of the athletic directors have been over time, right? Mm-hmm. I think as time has gone on in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years probably, we've seen a lot of skill sets that we've now acknowledged are critical to athletic administration, not just familiarity with the operation of team sports, right, but the business side, integration with other areas of the university enterprise, facilities management and administration. There's so many things that have come to that, and yet, there's not necessarily a full understanding when there's an issue on campus, as at least from the outside world, that the athletic director is actually the person that's kind of been involved in all those areas already, right?
Very underappreciated role.
Extremely underappreciated role. But I think as these positions become, and even the searches, by the way, for these positions have become more intricate and what they are looking for to fill these positions, I think you're going to see an increased appreciation for this. I think you're going to see a growing field of folks as far as the background and experiences for these positions. Obviously, there's some core things that are going to be always important, but there's going to be, in addition to the academics and athletics and competition, the fiscal management, there's going to be some governance aspects to this, at least familiarity about operating with governance, as we may or see changes in the structure of how college athletics, whether it's tweaks here and there, go forward in the future. How does that affect university enterprise, right? How does that affect what programs we're doing in athletics? How does this affect what we're doing as far as facilities management? How does this affect what we're doing as far as our recruiting? How does this affect scheduling? How does this affect, knowing our student population and what we're doing as far as who our feeders for that are? How does this affect what we're communicating with our alumni base? How does this affect, our board and what they're involved in as far as support of this? So there's so many, and I hate to rattle all those off, but it's a big job. It's a big job. I'm very fascinated and appreciative of the folks who sit in these positions. There's some great leaders, I think, in these positions. Who can do a lot of different things, but often are yelled at, when someone doesn't like the coach or what have you, or why did this player do X, Y, and Z, and it's, the first, major violation or infraction the institution has had in like 12 years or whatever from anything. But anyway, that comes with the territory. But I do think the background of the athletic directors and the experiences are going to grow, and the critical nature of the function they serve. This is not going to get smaller. This is going to grow. But I think also, and my hope is this in talking, work with a number of university presidents, is that there's a deep appreciation for that. Whereas university presidents have historically come from the academy, and although you're even seeing changes to that now, chancellors and provosts and things like that, where you're from the academic side of the house, and now there's an increasing focus for presidents to have fundraising management and things like that. There is an increased focus for that group to have the support from a global enterprise athletic director, and I think that appreciation is growing through organizations like AGB and ACE and things like that, and it's a good thing. I think
that's an interesting term, a global enterprise athletic director. What does that mean to you?
Global Enterprise Athletic Director, so you start with the fact that I'm just not calling you solely about athletics, right? So I'll take an example. This week in California, there's a case which actually ruled that there's a responsibility of educational institutions have to students as far as keeping them safe, right? I think every AD's worst nightmare is something happening at a stadium.
Yes.
So what does that mean? All right, so what does that mean as far as the function of athletics direction within safety and security issues and management on campus? Because that is going to be the biggest kind of amalgamation of students you have at a public event. It's usually going to be at a football game, basketball game. So you have to have that. It's not just what we're bringing for players and what we're keeping people eligible. Now you're involved in some other core issues about coordination with law enforcement, coordination with safety and security, coordination not just with building code issues, facilities and management. So when I say global enterprise, it means if you look at what it takes to manage an institution that may have a several $100 million endowment and may have a couple thousands of students and is subject to a review for an accreditation in a year or two, and what does that mean as far as the profile behind that? And yet you were tied to several buckets within that organization that appear not just on the court. That's what I mean by global enterprise athletics directors, that you have your fingers in a lot of areas, and they're going to be, even though you don't lead those areas, being informed on what the importance of those areas are going to be critical going forward.
Now, Dr. Wallace Lowe, the president at the University of Maryland, he said sports is so important now that the athletic department of a college is now the front porch of the university. Do you agree with that?
That's interesting. You said it's the front porch. I think there is some truth to that. Just because, again, you think about the window of what a college is and what people get introduced to first. There typically is, what you know about a school. I hate to say this, for a lot of kids when they're making college decisions, even myself, you knew what their athletics department looked like or what their reputation was. Which, by the way, went beyond wins and losses. How did the school act? Right. If something went wrong, were they a school that, tolerated different things on campus? Did they react favorably if things go wrong? So there's a lot of that, but there's also the, quite frankly, if you're looking from the presidential's desk, there's the issue of resources, right? As you're having the tax rules are changing, how endowments are changed and are viewed, and how outside business income for schools happen, it's going to be incumbent really upon athletics to, just facing facts, to help the president with things that may help get additional resources for the institution. How does that help with, development and things like that? So, in addition to the interest view of what you're doing to get kids interested in what your value is and kind of what makes you as a school, there's the issue about what you can do. What are your resources, what are your capabilities, what can we expand, what can we offer as programs? So you are kind of on the entry step for the transition of a lot of folks.
Now, I know from my other interviews that a lot of college presidents and athletic directors look to you for advice. What advice do you give athletic directors about their career path? I mean, traditionally, you think you got to be at an FBS school with a big-time football program if you want to hit the top programs. So when they come to you for career advice, which I know they do, what do you tell them?
Well, understand that the resources are never going to be what you may think they are. No matter what the school is, no matter what the school is, no matter what you think the conference contract says. So we start with that. And also understand that, just as much as there's a vetting process in going to an institution, for you, there's a vetting process that's mutual, right? As we have these scandals that may, be revealed in college athletics, I think the importance of background review for all parties is going to be essential about understanding what you're going into as a campus. I mean, you have to have an understanding about what issues may be in existence and what you're going to be asked to tackle. If you're going to a public institution in Florida and you don't understand how freedom of information works in Florida, Godspeed. It's just, and I'm sure every AD in Florida is nodding their head right now, the president as well. But there are certain things you have to prepare yourself for. So do your homework, understand the institution, understand the relationship with the president as far as what the philosophy is as far as athletics, understand what the flow is with the academic side of the house, what has historically taken place there, and whether that needs to be tweaked is something that probably will be looked at initially. And then also, of course, everybody's going to look at relationships. I don't have to talk about the relationship aspect because everybody knows that relationships are going to be important about what you're bringing to the table, what's pre-existing there. But understanding what issues you're going into and what is specific about that position in that university, the things that are not written on paper, that are not written on the profile for the board for the athletics foundation or what have you, those are going to be critical.
And what questions do the college presidents and athletic directors ask you about diversity and inclusion in institutions?
So in this day of social media, again, a lot of it is the reaction, right? How should I put forward a strong step, but understanding I'm at an institution that may not have done that before, right? I want to do something that I think is a positive step on diversity, but I also am cognizant of the fact that the school was founded in 1837, and this is going to be kind of a shakeup for them, at least by perception. And the answer is there's no one-size-cuts-all solution here. You have to understand what the progress is for your school. First start, is there a risk area, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what does your board look like? If you're a president, I have a question. What does your board look like? And in questioning, we have an all-male board. If we have a Me Too issue that happens on campus, we're not going to be equipped to deal with it because, quite frankly, optically, it's not going to look well. But let's talk about how that's affected your alumni relations. How does it affect your student engagement? Mm-hmm. How does that affect your recruiting? Kind of doing every president knows that your first year in office, or at least I hope they know, that you're doing a self-assessment of what you have on your campus, excuse me, to help you understand what you need to improve or what you may need to change. And then you're devising your strategic plan around that. Diversity is no different. Just like you would actually look at any weakness you had in development or academic programs that if you were going in for accreditation, diversity is the exact same way.
What are the important signs of commitment to diversity and inclusion at a university you tell them to look for in their search?
So first of all, did they factor diversity in the search, right? Whether you're a diverse candidate or not, and I think there's a misnomer that straight white males cannot be the biggest diversity champions that exist. They can be. Understanding what role that's played for the organization. Being able to have are they conversant? Like, the thing about diversity is, much like fee structures, and I've said this across industry and we dealt with this in the legal sector,
sure.
As people get, in the accounting world, used to exotic fee structures of how you deal with something, It's like, how do you talk the language of that? It's accounting speak. Well, in diversity, there's it's not a perfect analogy, but there's something similar to that. How do you find your own voice on diversity? Is there an effort to do that? And what phase is that in? Has it been brought up before? Is there a slogan someone made 25 years ago that was great and now we're repeating it again? Or is it, we're becoming more progressive and we're actually looking at, you know what? We may be in middle America and we may not have the most diverse profile, but you know what? Our teams are diverse. We recruit faculty who are diverse. We have supporters who are diverse. And what can we do to help that engagement so that feels welcome on our campus? And by the way, in this area of attrition for college enrollment, you just got yourself into a competitive advantage, because that's something that's going to help you, universally across, whether it's development, whether it's alumni engagement, but also certainly with student engagement and recruiting, and understanding what that means.
Now this is year 20, Title IX. For the first time, there are more female medical students in the first year class than before. What have you seen the impact of Title IX being on diversity and inclusion?
Well, in separating Title IX, the suits that I think have dealt with the sexual assault sphere versus those which have dealt with, and I hope this is not disappearing, because it's not in the conversation as much, but the athletic participation sphere. I think there's a sense that, looking back, we've done a lot better on the participation end, but there's work to do. I mean, you look at the Val Ackermans of the world, and many great leaders like her, and it's a great thing because you see the development of role models, and that's critical. You look at about the creation of sports. You don't see the claims that you used to as far as number of teams. Now we'll see if change structure in athletics.
Do you think that's from a commitment to diversity and inclusion? Finally?
I think it's because of a learned commitment. It's sort of like when you have one good thing that could come from government regulations periodically is that when it becomes around for so long, that it becomes ingrained that you don't have to think about it. If I build a restaurant across the street but I don't have a ramp for persons with disabilities, you're going to look at it weird, right? But that's because we've had the ADA around for a long time, because you now know that's just something you do.
What exactly is a learned commitment to diversity that you speak of?
When it becomes ingrained as second nature, that if it's not there, someone in the room says, hey, wait a minute, we just saw a whole slate of candidates that look the same. Are we sure we got in the right search, right?
And how long did it take for you to evolve as that type person with the learned commitment?
I think for me, it's been a series of discussions and leaders that, and I was very fortunate early in my career to work with people who were pretty advanced on diversity and what it meant to them, both in the legal and business setting, and to have the ability and confidence to ask those questions in environments where we just, okay, I know we're talking about this issue, let's pause and understand what that means. And it was great seeing that kind of early in my career and the value it had, with the decisions came back afterwards. I'm fortunate that I work with a firm where from top down, my managing partner, I'm waiting for him to tell me something not to do on diversity because everything I presented to him, it's great. And by the way, there's a good discourse about that, understanding why we need that, understanding what it means for us in the legal sector, and understanding how, because I think there's a link, again, between diversity and business, what the business advantages for that, and understanding how that can relate to our client base. And then we envelop it, becomes part of our strategic plan, we refine it, and then we go forward. And I think that a lot of that came from understanding things I saw early in my career, and hopefully still do. I've been, privileged to serve as chair of diversity of a large firm, but I think we all can learn even more about ways as that we can ingrain this more, and certainly within the athletics enterprise, about how we can take advantage of this talent pool that we have, this talent of ideas, this talent of people who have seen different things from a strategic perspective, the talent to do more with less, and then also engage in different communities so that the narrative in college athletics on diversity is not what someone else makes it, it's what we give to it. I think it's a great opportunity for us.
So it's been a great interview, Mr. Thomas. Let's end it with a personal uplifting question for you as a Philadelphia Eagle fan and a champion of diversity. Are you raising your two children to be New York Giant and Washington Redskin fans?
I would say my son is actually a dual fan of the Eagles and Redskins.
Okay. So diversity begins at home?
Yeah, diversity has begun at home.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is Jonathan Yates. Thank you for joining us for the interview.